This is Growth Climate's Kenneth Patey presenting The Anatomy of Human Interaction. Section 4, Beliefs and Value Systems, the Foundation Stones for Principalities.
What we're looking at here, since beliefs and value systems are so important, we're going to take a look at three strikingly different belief and value systems. We're going to look at a continuum, if you will. Our next slide will show you that model. What we have on this side is a belief and value system comprised of principle. We're going to refer to it as a freedom mode individual or freedom mode belief and value system. You'll find this on page 7 of section 4. On this other end of the continuum, in a stance and a belief and value system far different, totally contrasted to freedom principle, is a set of philosophies that these individuals operate by. In the middle is another group we term fairness individuals or fairness mode, who also have their own belief and value system. I have chosen in this to group them in 5 groups. For example, over here we have commitment to integrity. Here is commitment to integrity, however, in other words, there's a qualifier. They talk about integrity, but there are some things that, well, you know, however. Over here is a facade of integrity. We have here a position 2 and the same subject matter, but from the viewpoint of these individuals, 3, 4, and 5, respectively, on all of those. Be aware that on a continuum, if you have somebody who is positioned here, his belief and value system will be part of this one and part of that one. If he's positioned here, he'll be sort of fairness, but he'll use some force mode methodology. So we're going to state that you could be anywhere along that continuum and have your own unique set of values. We're going to talk specifically about both ends of that continuum and the midpoint. Let me define principality. A principality can be an individual. It can be a group of individuals. It could literally be an organization. It could be a country, for that matter. So an individual or a group of individuals, that could be families, it could be a neighborhood. And these individuals or groups of individuals have a belief and a value system. And what they do is set out the code of conduct. And that code of conduct will be an outgrowth of their belief and their values. In addition, the other part that makes it a principality is that they have the right to dictate or set out consequences. Now, I think you could recognize that dictate consequence is going to come more from this end of this continuum than it would be from this one. This one would set out a set of conduct or policies or recommendations. These would be absolute, immovable mandates. So an individual or group of individuals with a belief and value system out of which they set out a code of conduct and then have in place the consequences for those who violate the rules and rewards for those who would adhere to them. That gives us the definition of principality. If you'll turn with me to give kind of a taste for this, I'm going to invite, before we go to page 9, I'm going to invite our 3 readers, whom we've pre-selected, to read from page 5 of section 4. Just go back 2 pages, if you will. And what we have on this page of your manual is a capsulized view, a view of these 3 worlds, freedom, fairness, and force, from the viewpoint of one who is in that principality. So if I could have you begin, Tanya, and read freedom mode world viewpoint on the left column.
There are people who are totally honest and upright in all their dealings with others. They have as much concern for others as they do for themselves. There are also those who are totally dishonest, whose concerns are solely for self. Along the continuum between these 2 positions are spread multitudes of individuals whose values and perceptions are as varied as the shades of gray. Any attempt to judge another person based on his outward appearance or without the benefit of time and exposure would be ludicrous.
Thank you. Sam, if you'd read the fairness mode viewpoint.
Very few people are able to live up to the high ideals either God or society has set out, and few are totally bad either, for that matter. If things could be kept fair, if there were more equal opportunities for all, and if everyone paid his own way and acted more responsibly, life could be quite pleasant. Bottom line, though, we cannot allow inappropriate behavior to persist, even if it means having to resort to the use of strong measures to control or to curtail it.
Next one, please.
Nobody is honest. Given the chance, there is not one man who would pass up an opportunity to take advantage of another. Anyone who tries to make it in this world by being honest is naive and deserves what he gets. The race is to the swift. He who has the gold rules. If a few are going to make it to the top and end up controlling all the others, I may as well be on top.
Three very different characters, aren't they? Three totally different value systems. If you now go to that next page, and we have this model on the board, I'm going to have you read from the three columns a breakout or an expansion of the beliefs and values. The first one, under freedom principle, is commitment to integrity. If you'd read that for us, Trudy. And what we're going to do, group, they're going to read to us from the three columns in rotation so that we understand what each of these three principalities, different as they are, feel like. Please.
Freedom Principle 1, commitment to integrity. The principle is never compromised regardless of the cost.
Fairness Philosophy 1, commitment to integrity. However, the compromising of integrity is absolutely necessary at times.
Force Philosophy 1, facade of integrity. Those who profess integrity always have an ulterior motive.
Now we're going to go to number 1, 2, 3, and 4 in sequence, and these are a further breakdown of these three principles or philosophies. Number 1, please.
I am totally honest, recognizing that a lie is any communication given with the intent to deceive.
There is nothing wrong with half-truths when they are used to keep others from being hurt.
Never show your whole hand. If people choose to read more into your words than what you say, that's their problem.
Number 2.
Unless I am released from commitments, I must keep them.
No one should be held to commitments that are not fair.
The best commitments are those you can avoid making, those you can deny having made, and those you can get out of.
Number 3.
I search for truth and align with it.
Truth is very difficult to determine. Sometimes you just have to go with the facts.
There is no ultimate truth. Integrity is what is true for you at the moment.
And number 4.
I take responsibility willingly for any problems I cause and to the extent possible make them right.
Even though some people cause problems unwittingly, they still need to take responsibility for the harm they cause others.
Only fools confess and take responsibility. Besides, there is always a way around a law.
Thank you very much. Now, which person would you like to associate with? From which principality? If you were buying a house, what would you hope the person has as his belief and value system? If you were buying a car, what would you hope his belief and value system was? If you were choosing someone to marry, what would you hope the belief and value system was? See, very interesting. And are they not very different worlds? If you'll notice on your page, there is a little square. What I invite you to do in your own time, sometime following the course, is to read through the 5 pages that are here. We've taken each of the 5 principles or philosophies and we've broken them down into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or however many there are. I'd like you to go through and with all the integrity you have, mark it for where you were before we started this class 4 hours ago and see where it is your belief and value system has been. You'll discover some very interesting things. Very few are going to find yourself through all 5 pages in this column or that column. If you're in this one, I'd like to meet you. If you're in this one, I probably don't want to. What you're apt to find is that you're going to be somewhere all over that chart. You will, however, tend to lock one place more than another. If you're kind of caught between fairness and freedom, you're apt to have a mix of these two. Once in a while, you'll have one over here and you say, ooh, I'd like to have a few more of those. If you're caught on this side, you'll find yourself with a mix of freedom principle and a mix of fairness philosophy. If you're one who is a stressee, and a stressee is somebody who a stressor can keep in control and they buckle whenever the pressure is on up here, you may find yourself everywhere on that chart depending where you are in circumstance, because a stressee tends to be a chameleon, adjusting belief and value system professed to match what the stressor demands of you. Now it's very interesting. One of the challenges that you have initially as you look at the material is you say, my gosh, as I read through this is my husband, he's just a jerk. Or this is my supervisor at work. If we didn't have him there, we could have a pretty nice place to work. But he's a jerk. Now the boss thinks he's like this, but the boss ought to see him when he's not around. He treats us like this. I had a lady one time say, as we began looking at force philosophy, she just blurted out, boy, that's my spouse. And periodically she'd, oh yeah, he does that. Oh, he does that. Oh yeah, you ought to have seen him 2 days ago. And the farther we went through the material, the more quiet she got. And at the end, when I asked what had impacted the group, her hand rather timidly went up and she said, you know, I said that first night that my husband was obviously force, and she said, I've come to realize maybe I've misjudged him, and I think some of that force philosophy's in me, and I've drawn closure about him, and I've got to do a lot of thinking. And I could see this lady start to take some responsibility, and it changed the dynamics of the marriage for those two. Sometimes, though, it is difficult to tell whether a person is fairness or force, because they both use manipulation and control tactics. If you will turn with me for a moment, hold your place here on that model, but go back all the way back to section 15 for a moment. Section 15 is a list of control resistance methods. They're listed in alphabetical order starting on page 4 of that section. Here, for example, if you had a control method of authoritarian stance, you will have above it a 1 and a 2 and a 3. Here's the copy and description of that particular control method. We have an assignment for you. This is, again, something you'll do on your own. If you go back through this section, I'd like you to look at it, and as you read it, be aware, first of all, that this is written from a force mode perspective. In other words, the harshest way it could be viewed is how it is written in that section. However, you say, well, that kind of happened in my family, but not that harsh. If it happened at all, then you would circle number 1. If you ever used it to block somebody else's attempt to control you, you would circle number 2. If you actually ended up using that control method to get somebody else to do what you wanted, in other words, you became the controller and the manipulator, you would circle 3. You may, in some cases, be circling all 3. In some cases, it'll be 1 or maybe 2. In many cases, it will be none. But use this as an assessment of what kinds of things have occurred, perhaps in your family of origin, what might be occurring in your place of employment, what might be occurring in your current household, in your current marriage. If you're going to do it for more than one of those, just change pen color and go back and redo it. But you'll find it a very, very revealing piece of work. I recall the first time we had a list, and we only had about 25 identified then. I just asked the group to sit there and mark them. It was 15 or 20. It doesn't take very long to mark the ones you use. And one lady blurted out without raising her hand, good grief, I used every one of these. Now that was kind of an interesting thing for her. But it also was a lot of courage to actually voice that. Now maybe she didn't mean to say it. Maybe it just was a blur, oh my gosh. But she stated it. I'd also like you to note that there are some symbols. For example, some symbols have a square that is filled in solid. On others, there is a square that has in the middle a circle that is left open. This simply means it's a major force mode control tactic. The one with a circle in the middle, and it goes through the entire section. Anytime you find a square with a circle, it is a major control tactic of an abuser. Somebody who is abusive psychologically, emotionally, sexually, physically, any abuser, that's their bag of tricks, if you will. And if you want to know how they work, the list is there. So I think you'll find that very, very helpful. Let's go back to section 4 to page 7. Sometimes you will look at an individual and you say, my gosh, that's a manipulative person. Well, he's obviously force. Maybe not. You think, well, this person's fairness. You may actually say, oh my gosh, this person is such a wonderful freedom person. What you find many cases that individuals who are here will voice freedom principle as their preferred stance. But you watch their feet, they're using force mode methodology to get what they want. So the only way you can tell where an individual really is to have it stand the test of time. So when you look at an individual, we're back to this whole business of stepping back as an observer. This person appears to be force mode. Is he or isn't he? This lady appears to be a freedom mode person. Is she or isn't she? And you simply watch over time. You will become good enough at this after a while. You won't miss it very often because the earmarks are so clear when you recognize the manipulation and control tactics that people use. I guess if I were to make an important statement, it would be to ask yourself not really where you are, though as you go through this and check them off, you'll have a fairly good indicator. But ask yourself, in what direction am I moving? What direction do I want to move? It's always easy to label somebody. Let me tell you what happens to a person that appears to be fairness, but really isn't. If a person who is pretending to be fair, and I think it's also interesting that most people who try to keep things fair use force to keep it fair. If a person really has a heart that wants to do what is best for children, if a person really has a heart that wants to build good, solid, lasting relationships, and you ask this person what he or she believes, they will tend to voice this. And when they learn what this is and that they aren't quite there, they will begin immediately course correcting and moving that direction. If this person is a force mode person masquerading as being fair, oh, I'll treat you right, trust me. If they're masquerading as fair, the second they find that people are learning what manipulators are, they will more carefully mask their motives and their methods so you can't see this part of them, and they will try to place out here more of the facade of what they think you will be in a comfort zone with. Very interesting process. Don't be too quick to judge, but also be very aware that things are not always as they appear to be. Sometimes they are, but be aware enough to look to see if over time what you thought was the case really is.
This is Growth Climate's Kenneth Patey presenting The Anatomy of Human Interaction. Section 5, Stressor and Stressee Worlds, a close look at principalities of manipulation and control.
Section 5 is engineered to give us an in-depth look at principalities of manipulation and control. We're going to take a look at stressee worlds. A stressor is one who has the capacity, because of his ability to control, to keep other people in stress. Now, it doesn't mean that the person in stress will always be one who buckles. They may buckle on the surface, but they'll do covert kinds of things. So we're going to talk about two kinds of stressors and two kinds of stressees. A very, very interesting and a very, very uncomfortable kind of world. If we talk about stressors, the two kinds are these. A fairness mode stressor is called a stressor. One from force mode will be referred to as a super stressor because he simply is all the more violent, all the more strict, all the more rigid. We're going to talk about stressees. Stressees will come in two varieties. There will be a resistant stressee and a non-resistant stressee. Here's a way you can tell if you're being manipulated. Have you ever found yourself standing there talking to somebody and you feel like you're being waltzed and you don't even have a partner and you just feel like you're being maneuvered? That person is manipulating you. If you will feel it, you may not know quite why, you may not know quite how, but you just know that something is wrong. You find yourself struggling. If you are resistant to it, you find a resistant posture rising in you. You are a resistant stressee. If you are one who instantaneously goes and does what the message is, you're probably non-resistant. You may never fight back, you may never speak back, you may simply think, well, that's the way life is. He says, I do. She says, I do. That isn't meant to be a marriage ceremony. What it is our willingness or unwillingness to respond to the pressure or manipulation of another individual. A super stressor will use all of the manipulation and control tactics in their most grievous form, the most rigid, harsh form. A fairness mode person will use that manipulation, but it will be softer. It doesn't really change much in terms of outcome. If you were to think back to the model we had on freedom, fairness, and force, at the top, above the word freedom, where the arrow pointed, we have a line that says the ability to maximize your potential. And then down below fairness and force, where the arrow's pointed, we have a band that said potential is seldom reached, bondage. That's really what happens when manipulation and control is used. Let's illustrate stressor-stressee with a role play. I've invited Adriana to come up and take a part, if you wouldn't mind, Adriana. I've asked her to take the part of my wife, and we're going to role play a family circumstance. We're going to illustrate, first of all, big me, little Adriana. Obviously, that's super stressor to stressee, all right? Here's the circumstance. When I left this morning, I told Adriana, reminded her that we were having the company social at our home. She promised that she would have the home in perfect order and everything ready for the social. I arrive home 20 minutes before it's to occur, and both she and the house are a shambles. So I walk in and I say, I don't understand this. We got people here in 20 minutes. What have you been doing all day? On the phone to your mother?
Oh, no, I was busy. I was
Hey,
cleaning.
you were supposed to be busy doing what you promised me this morning, true or not?
Yes.
Then
yes.
why haven't you done it?
Well, I tried really hard.
Yeah, you're trying. You're very trying to me.
Well,
Now I've got 18 and a half minutes now. I've got to get myself cleaned up. Will you get out?
I will do it.
Thank you.
I will do it.
And I expect it.
I will be done.
Don't you want to just hit me? Am I horrible or what? All right, now, identical circumstance, but it's a reversed role. It's big Adriana, and it's little me. Let's see how this one goes. Adriana, I'm a little late, I realize, but you know, you were going to have the home in order, and it's really kind of a mess still.
Why do I have to have it done? Why don't you do it? You invite those people.
But you told me that you would do it.
Well, I changed my mind, and I have the right. So if you want a party, get yourself busy.
Oh, where's my apron?
Just in the kitchen. You know where it is. Go get it.
Okay. How come I didn't get applause? Okay, now it is little me, little Adriana. Oh, Adriana, I'm so sorry. I was ready to leave an hour and a half ago, and that jerk of a boss gave me 5 more errands to run. Can you believe that? It's his party.
I know. He always does the same to you.
How do we get stuck with this?
I don't know. I don't know. He's supposed to do some. We didn't ask for this. It was his fault.
You know what we ought to do? We ought to just leave. I'll get fired.
Well, yeah, that's true. How about if I pretend I'm sick?
Yeah, we used that last year.
Oh, we won't get it this time.
Do you know what? We got that rheostat light. I'm going to turn it dim and break it so you can't turn it up. Let's sweep the floor, put the dog dish under the couch, okay?
Let's do that. We can do that.
Yeah. And you know, Here's another thing, too. The boss is always the biggest pig. He always wants the biggest hamburger. Let's mix up one with part of that can of dog food.
Just do it. He deserves it.
He does.
He does.
Okay, now this last one is big me, little Adriana, my perception. But it is big Adriana, little me, her perception. Where's this one going to go? You don't look any better than the house. What have you been doing all day? Talking on the phone to your old lady?
Oh, sure. That's what you think. Look at yourself. You funny thing. You just
You know
spend
something?
the whole day outside and coming
Why
in
in
and
the
making-
world do you stand here making excuses? You're the one who had all day to do this, and you committed to it this morning. Now, why isn't it done?
I did everything that I could. You ask for more than I can. Get a maid. I am a wife and not a maid. You get it?
You know, I'll tell you what I get. I'm looking in your eyes, dear, and I'm finally seeing the problem. The lights are on, but there's nobody home.
Sure. You don't pay the electricity bill.
Thank you very much. Isn't she great? Oh. Do we do that to each other? It's sad, but we do. We do that to each other. And anytime either I put her down or she puts me down, we are devaluing one another. We are de-affirming the worth of individuals who have infinite worth. I really believe that. I think any time that we do anything which diminishes another individual, we are robbing them of something very, very important. I don't think we ought to do that. What I want to show you in a way probably more clear than you've seen before is to give you a view of this world of big me, little you, from two viewpoints, the force mode viewpoint and the fairness mode. First of all, what I want you to notice is the size differential in these characters. If this is high worth, what is this? Not very much worth at all. And for this individual, this is exactly how he views the world, his principality. What is a caste system? This is, by the way, a force mode caste system. What is a caste system? What do you think of first when you hear that phrase?
It's a society or a grouping of where people are in certain positions, and that's where they're supposed to remain.
That's where they remain. They are in that level of society or that caste according to their parentage. For example, in some countries of the world, if our parents were teachers, you can be a teacher. If your parents were workmen, laborers, could a child of a laborer ever become a teacher? Never. It won't occur. If your parents were government leaders, you can be a government leader. If you were born worker class, your children will forever be worker class. Now we tend to think, well, that's over there. I want you to know that caste systems are alive and well in the Western world. They're alive and well everywhere. They're alive in families, they're alive in businesses, they're alive in schools, they're alive in neighborhoods, they're alive on playgrounds. It's a caste system. Let's take a look at this one. A caste system has at the top, and this is force mode, so we have a super stressor. He has around him an inner circle. Notice that this one is a little higher in elevation because this is the fair-haired boy. This is the one who is being groomed to replace the super stressor. He has more privileges than anybody else. If there are consequences, they're kind of quietly given, maybe publicly a little bit of chastisement, but rarely ever. These people in this group are paid very, very well to keep him looking good. Over here we have a hatchet man. This is an individual who carries out the force mode edicts of the super stressor. I was standing one day in a foyer and I had a little 8-year-old boy come up and tug me on the jacket, and I looked down and he said, "Mr. Patey, my father told me to tell you that your boy is disrupting our class and we aren't able to learn and you are to fix it." Now you see, this boy was the hatchet man for his father. He carried out these warnings and these threats. If anybody down here is in trouble with this person and goes and complains to the super stressor, well, you probably couldn't get to him anyway. But even if you did, he'll say, "I'm sorry, you'll have to deal with him. It's out of my hands." No, it isn't. Anything this man does is a direct edict from him. Now, we have here a management group. This is the individuals who see that the work gets done. I have listed here token or badge positions. These people think they're working their way on up the ladder. Very few of them will ever make it to the inner circle. In fact, oftentimes, inner circle individuals are pulled from outside so that this group doesn't think that they have a way up. Down here are all our worker bees. These are all the pawns. The ones that do all the work rarely get the credit, rarely get the pay. Now here's another interesting character, a black sheep. Notice this person has a circle. The circle, through all of our symbolism in the course thus far, is an individual who is freedom. He's a principled individual. And the reason he's out as a black sheep is he won't conform. He won't conform to the system. He won't brown nose. He won't fawn those above him. He will not play the games of the system. And he may even have been in a leadership position, but because he crossed the stressor, is somehow out of the system. You think, well, why don't they get rid of him? He's a whipping boy. They'll say to this person, you want to be like him? Keep up what you're doing. Oh, sorry. So we have the person changing. That's force mode. Now you say, oh my gosh, but you know, we don't have that many in a family. How could it be in a family? It's very easy. They simply draw on people outside the family to prove the point. I know a family where we know the daughter very, very well. She's a mother of several children, so she's not a little one. But she said, my mother said to me one day, Ann, I am so proud of you. I am just so grateful. And by the way, Ann is an only child. I am so grateful that you're not like so-and-so's daughter down the block. Why, she would be the most heartbreaking person to have as your posterity. You are such a wonderful child. Now, the mother's trying to groom here as the fair-haired daughter. Interestingly, in this family, it is the mother who was the controller, strong matriarchy. And it was the fair-haired daughter. Well, fair-haired over whom? Over anybody else that exists. You have it at school, teacher's pet, so-called. All these systems are there. I've had people say to me, that's my school district. I know who the superintendent is, and I know who the hatchet man is in our office, and I know who the gopher is. Go for this and go for that. And never much credit. Force mode. Let's take the next slide. Turn one page in your manual. Here's fairness mode. Oh my goodness, kind of interesting, isn't it? What do you see in size differential on this one compared to the force one? They aren't as small at the bottom, are they? There is far more value for human beings in a fairness world. And yet we still have the same cast of characters. And each of these, by the way, are detailed in definition and description in the manual, and you can refer to those. The thing that's characteristic about a fairness world is that regardless of what a person feels behind the mask, there is a mask. And you notice the mask is identical for every one of them? It's the outward presentation that you're supposed to present in that fairness mode society or that principality. And even though they're smiling very nicely on the outside, the knife is ready to get you behind their back, because it is still a very manipulative world, a world of facade. But the same character exists out here in terms of black sheep. This person won't play the facade game. But because he's needed in the system, they keep him. All right, let's shift over now to page 15 for a moment. I want to read the title to you. It says, Behind the Masks, Exposing the Assumed Rights and Predictable Behaviors and Tactics of Stressors and Superstressors. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Arising out of a person's own belief and value system. This is the one that we had read here earlier, facade of integrity. Those who profess integrity always have an ulterior motive. Whose world is that one? That's a world of force. And if you were looking at this on the page, and we have a comparable one for fairness, right after it is a statement that says, in fact right above it, it says, stressor or superstressor Bill of Rights. Turn with me to page 17 for a moment for the one on fairness. Commitment to integrity, however. And there's that list we read. But right here at the bottom it says rights. It is their Bill of Rights, arising out of their belief and value system, They specify what they have the right to do. They may not always voice it. They will rarely ever voice it outside the system. But within the system, anybody who's there knows what the assumed rights are, or presumed rights of the stressor are, or superstressor. If you turn over one more page, it says predictable behavior and tactics. We're not going to take the time to go through these, but I invite you to do that. Think of some individual. It may be yourself, but to go through and see if you fit any of these. Simply be aware that fairness or force, those individuals arising out of their belief and value system have assumed rights, and they exercise their rights in the way in which they deal with other individuals. And if you were to select an individual and say, I wonder where he fits or she fits, and go through and check them off, you will find yourself giving a description of that individual or seeing the description. And when you're done, Section 7 has a self-worth genogram and a way for you to check off relationship style according to all of those pages, and there are instructions there for it. But you will know where a particular individual fits by what his philosophy is, by what his assumed rights are, and by his predictable behavior and conduct. The material in this section is the result of years of observing stressors and superstressors, listening to the reports of individuals who've been faced with abuse of any kind. And we've tracked and marked what it is that those individuals believe their rights are, and then to be able to predict their behavior and what they do with those who are their victims.